begin, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to visualize PedCatch data in QGIS. This is really important because if you want to visualize your PedCatches, they're not directly transferable, or you're not directly able to import them into programs like Mapbox, but having QGIS is a really effective tool for visualizing and editing PedCatch data. So for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to be showing how to visualize PedCatches on public transport within Glen Ira. And to do this, I've just loaded in the WNMS base file from the last tutorial that we created using a Mapbox style, and then load the PedCatch data in on top of that. So I've just searched pedcatch.com in my web browser, and then that's brought up the pedestrian catch website. What this tool allows us to do is to assess the walkability catchment of a selected site, and you can adjust the walking speed and how far you want to assess in terms of distance. So it's commonly set to 10 minutes, but you can assess anything from 5 minutes or up to 30 minutes as well in terms of walkability. To initiate the process, the first thing I'm going to do is to search for a place. So I'm going to start with Caulfield train station. It works off a Google Maps search database, which is very handy, so you can search just as you would with Google Maps. And then scrolling in there, you can see our marker is placed there at Caulfield Station. There's a couple of things here that we can assess. The first is the start marker, and that's this little yellow point here. If we wanted to add multiple start markers, then that is also handy for us to get a more detailed picture of assessing walkability. For example, with Caulfield Station here, there's a couple of different entrances. So I'm actually going to pop one marker over on this side here, and one down here, and then one over here as access points to the station. The next is the gradient of, which is currently set to 1 in 14. That's quite commonly seen as a nice, easily walkable gradient, particularly if you're assessing things like the walkability for older people. I'm going to leave the time set to 10 minutes. That typically gives us an 800 meter catchment. Under the isochrone type, I'm going to shift that to an offset buffer of 25 meters, and I'll show you what that looks like once our scenario is tested. And then we have the typical speed limit. So the average person walks about 1.33 meters per second, but say if you wanted to assess the walkability of an older person, they walk a little bit slower, around 1.95 meters a second. So we're going to make that adjustment before we test this scenario. Once all these things are set, I'm just going to hit start and wait for that scenario to carry out. You can then see the little markers start to travel around the map, and the counter indicating how far you can walk within that distance. Now that that's completed, you can then see the buffer for our isochrone type, what that's created there. So now that we've got this scenario downloaded, runs rather, we're then going to go in and download the scenario as a KML file. So to do that, just click download KML scenario, and then that will download into your browser. So now that we're back here in QGIS, I'm just going to load in that KML file that we just took from PedCatch. So to do that, I'm just going to go into add layer, or in the data source manager at the top here, and then just make sure vector layer is selected. Under the source, just selecting the 3 buttons here, just jump into my downloads where that PedCatch downloaded to, and select add, and then that will then show the elements of the data that are going to be imported. So we've selected all, and the layers are added to a group, which is really handy to keep things together. And then we'll just select OK and close. And then as you can see there, the data has popped up in our file, and there is a PedCatch of our walkability study. The next thing that we're going to do is just make some edits to that to make it more visible. For PedCatches specifically, the way I like to do that is just to make it nice and clear by removing some of the extraneous detail. So I've just unticked markers, maximum distance and waves here in QGIS. And then I'm then going to double click on convex hulls and go into the symbology menu. And then that will then bring up the ability to adjust the appearance of the PedCatch. So to do that, I'm just going to go simple red fill and maybe take it down to an opacity of 5%. Click OK. So an opacity, changing the opacity is really handy if you want to visualize a lot of data. As you can see though, that's not quite dark enough. I'm actually going to keep it green and change it up to 50%. There you go. So then you can actually still see some of the roads underneath and how the PedCatch routes overlap, which is really handy. So from here, then if you want to export this data to use in another program, say Mapbox, just go into the layered group here, click export, save as a layered definition file, and then save it to your computer.